Welcome everyone to This Explainer. If you're a focused learner looking to really understand the deeper mechanics of how our minds and our lives evolve as we get older, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to completely reframe the concept of midlife. We're throwing out those old, tired cliches about the midlife crisis. Instead, we're diving into some truly fascinating psychological evidence that points to this time not as a crisis at all, but as a profound and powerful awakening. We're going to explore exactly how the wisdom you've accumulated over the decades becomes the very engine that powers the most meaningful life changes you will ever make.
I want you to consider this for just a second. Is it possible that the first 40 years of your life were literally just practice? It's a pretty provocative thought, isn't it? For so long, society has conditioned us to view getting older with this underlying sense of anxiety. Like a ticking clock where our best days are somehow shrinking in the rearview mirror. But the research and the psychological frameworks we're unpacking today suggest the exact opposite. What if everything you've experienced up until now was simply the training ground, the essential preparation you needed to actually begin living?
Okay, let's dive into this. The whole idea actually comes from a brilliant psychological metaphor by Carl Jung. He viewed human life as having a distinct morning and afternoon. The afternoon of life is this critical psychological transition that usually hits right between the ages of 35 and 40. During your youthful morning, your energy is almost entirely outward-facing. But as that afternoon approaches, the focus makes a massive shift. The goals that once drove you suddenly feel a little less satisfying, and your attention naturally turns inward. You start seeking deeper meaning, genuine self-understanding, and this process called individuation. Really, that's just a fancy psychological term for becoming your truest, most complete self. And it's a direct result of all the tough lessons and wisdom you gathered during those earlier years.
To really wrap our heads around the shift, think back to your 20s and early 30s, what we call the morning of life. You were probably consumed with establishing yourself in the outside world, right? Building a career, navigating early relationships, maybe starting a family, and very much trying to lock down your social identity. But as you transition into the afternoon, that drive to build an external facade gives way to the pursuit of internal meaning. You want to understand yourself, you fiercely want to protect your peace, and you crave that true individuation we just talked about. The trap that so many people fall into is entering this afternoon phase using the exact same ambitions and assumptions that guided their youth. They don't realize that the second half of life presents entirely different psychological tasks.
And that brings us to the absolutely defining question of this whole era. What do I truly want from my life? Think about it. During your 20s, when you're still figuring out who you even are, your decisions are heavily influenced by outside forces. You're reacting to family expectations, bending to social pressure, or chasing a very conventional definition of success. But around age 40, this vital question finally emerges. And it doesn't come from a place of panic, it comes from a place of crystal clear self-awareness. Because of the successes, and maybe more importantly, the specific failures you've already experienced, you finally possess a clear understanding of your personal values, your distinct strengths, and your limitations. The struggles of the morning have essentially handed you the precise wisdom needed to ask this question and demand an authentic answer.
And this brilliantly illustrates how emotional maturity fundamentally transforms our daily mindset, completely replacing the anxiety of youth with the quiet confidence of maturity. That intense worry about being accepted when we're young, it gets entirely replaced by a fierce desire to protect our peace. Where a young person is terrified of making a mistake, the mature mind, powered by wisdom, recognizes that mistakes are literally the fabric of growth. And honestly, perhaps most importantly, while the youthful mindset is completely obsessed with keeping up with strict societal timelines, the mature mindset is just focused on establishing healthy boundaries. You've experienced disappointment, unexpected changes and loss, and that has forged a kind of resilience in you that simply cannot be learned from a textbook.
So the crucial point here is that all this accumulated experience, it doesn't just sit there gathering dust. It forms what we can call the wisdom toolkit. And this toolkit is exactly how wisdom powers major life changes. Over the past couple of decades, you've gathered deep professional knowledge and gained invaluable experience in how to build and sometimes repair complex relationships. But let's look specifically at the resilience learned directly from past failures. When you're 25, a major career setback or a failed project feels like the end of the world. But at 40, that exact same failure is just recognized as data. It acts as a catalyst. If you decide to completely pivot your career or start a new business, you're not starting from scratch. You're launching from a platform of hard-won resilience and highly practical decision-making skills. This toolkit is the ultimate engine for pulling off a massive life pivot.
Which brings us right to this specific milestone, age 40. Now, 40 is widely cited in psychological circles as the beginning of a more conscious, confident, purposeful, and fulfilling chapter. Why? Well, because it is the exact intersection where immense preparation finally meets opportunity. You now have that robust wisdom toolkit we just discussed, but you also still possess the vital energy and time required to create meaningful change. This is the precise reason why so many highly successful businesses, incredible creative projects, and profound personal transformations are successfully launched at this age and beyond. The foundation has been poured. Now it's finally time to build the house you actually want to live in.
But of course, standing in the way of that amazing transformation is a really powerful cultural illusion, these invisible deadlines. Society places these incredibly rigid expectations on human achievement. You're somehow expected to complete your education right at 22, lock in your lifetime career by 30, be perfectly married by 35, and have achieved significant wealth by 40. Because, it makes total sense to expect a 22-year-old to perfectly map out what they want to do for the next 50 years of their life, right? We are constantly surrounded by these invisible deadlines, and they act like a pressure cooker. They create entirely unnecessary anxiety and a false, toxic sense that you're somehow always falling behind your peers.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how quickly all those heavy societal expectations just crumble when they hit reality. Ask yourself, what if your real life doesn't fit the schedule? The truth from the source material is deeply validating here. Real life rarely follows such a predictable schedule. And once you shatter those invisible deadlines, you are liberated. At 40, guided by all that accumulated wisdom, a person can completely change careers. They can return to school, launch a startup, travel the world, pursue a creative dream, or just completely walk away from a life that no longer feels meaningful. You realize the schedule was a myth all along, and you are totally free to write your own timeline.
To understand why tearing up that schedule is completely okay, we need to respect that every single life stage has its own unique, irreplaceable purpose. Youth is your era of exploration, discovery, and having the raw courage to just experiment. This naturally shifts in your 30s into a period of responsibility, high ambition, and structured growth. And then your 40s are perfectly designed for reflection, profound confidence, and reinvention. The struggles and the hustle of those earlier stages, they actively generate the specific wisdom needed as fuel for these later changes. This proves that the years you've already lived were absolutely not wasted, even if you are changing direction right now. Every single day of exploration and responsibility was vital preparation for this moment of rebirth.
There's this really profound realization that happens during this transition. It goes like this. They become less interested in proving themselves and more interested in becoming themselves. Just think about the immense freedom in that statement for a second. You are finally shedding the exhaustion of constantly seeking external approval. You no longer measure your success purely by money or status or what your neighbors think. Instead, success gets redefined by your inner peace, a sense of deep purpose, meaningful relationships, and authentic personal freedom. It is the ultimate transition from seeking validation to confidently claiming your own identity.
Let's see how this all builds, because ultimately, that famous phrase, life starts at 40, isn't actually about a biological age at all. It's about an awakening. It represents that powerful tipping point where your raw life experience officially alchemizes into profound wisdom. It's the moment when your past mistakes are no longer sources of shame, but are clearly recognized as vital, necessary lessons. And most importantly, it's the exact moment when fear loses its grip on your decision-making. You realize you don't need to remain trapped by the expectations of the past ever again.
Which leaves us with one final lingering question. Are you ready to write your best chapter? The absolute best parts of your life aren't necessarily behind you. They may very well be waiting to be written by the wisest version of you that has ever existed. Life truly begins when you finally have the courage, the hard-earned wisdom, and the self-belief to live it entirely on your own terms. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Take a moment today to reflect on your own wisdom toolkit, and I truly hope this empowers you to step out and embrace the brilliant afternoon of your life.